It is the 17th of June 2014, and this is the audio podcast, episode 119, Ongoing Summer Beats.
Yes, that was Scott Hewitt. I'm Samuel Freeman. Adam Yantris here as well. And the audio podcast this week has a review. We have some news, other, and plunder. So full in terms of content.
Indeed, we are. And the many ways you can listen or watch the audio podcast. These include YouTube, G-Podder, iTunes, Stitcher, something, and you can also get in contact with us via Twitter. That's at the audio podcast, and you can also email show@theaudiopodcast.co.uk. And there are also some notes, and Scott will tell you about the notes right now.
You can find the notes for the show at theaudiopodcast.co.uk/show/119, where you can find all the notes from previous shows. You can find the news that will be in next week's show, and all of the random things the audio podcast has done are all documented on there for your enjoyment in your own time. How about that?
Very good.
So if you're enjoying the show notes, here's an item you will have already seen, but back in show 99, that was January the 13th, 2014, we talked about a product announcement which was from IK Multimedia, which was about their iRings. Now, as people who, as a group, we've all done lots of things with extended interfaces and things like this, and experimental interfaces. And at the time, we had a bit of an argument about whether this was something people wanted, or whether we thought it would be any good, or whether any of us would like it or be tempted to ever use it. And IK Multimedia contacted us and sent us a set. So Adam's had some to play with, and as a consequence, he has his thoughts regarding the IK Multimedia iRing.
Indeed. So let me begin. So I got sent basically like a production version of the whole system. So hold on, I'm going to show you the box. So look, that's the outside the box for you YouTube listeners. I mean, it's basically like a kind of almost CD shaped box that's about, an inch and a bit thick. And it's all very nicely packaged. You get some paperwork and you get the iRings in the box. And so what the iRings are, they're not technically rings, because if I show you the camera here, you can see that they're actually kind of T-shaped, but they slip in between your fingers, and they're plastic. One side has got 3 dots in the line, and the other side has got 3 dots in a kind of triangle. And you get 2 of them with each box, so you can kind of do this. You have one design on one side and one design on the other side. And you can get, as I understand it, I've got the grey ones, but you can also get them in green and white. I don't know, maybe IK Multimedia will release more colours and that kind of thing. So the way it works is it actually integrates through an iOS device. So here's my iPad. I don't know, no, you'll see just a reflection of my thing. You won't be able to see the app itself. But if you go to the IK Multimedia iRing site, you'll see pictures of the whole thing. You get an app called iRing FX Controller, which is the main app, and that basically uses the camera in the device to pick up the 2 different design patterns. So it can pick up both at the same time. It can pick up the 2 different 3-dotted patterns on the iRings, and then you can convert those to different either controllers, or you can actually route audio into the app and out of the app using Audio Bus. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the basic setup. You can also download another free app which is called iRing Music Maker, which is like a cut down sequencing app. I would say that app isn't particularly useful in a creative way, but it kind of shows you how to use the system. Have you guys got any questions so far?
So I've got the first one just leaps at me immediately, which is just to say, does it work? Does it track them properly? Because having been involved in experimental interfaces for a long time, I've I can't tell you how many times somebody has told me they have something which does what you've just described. It's cost hundreds of pounds and it doesn't work in the slightest.
Well, okay, I can fill you in right now and say that once the system is set up, it works fine, and it does track both at the same time, and it's got a really cool thing. So not just it doesn't just track X and Y positions, but it also tracks Z as well. So how close you get and how far away you get. So you can use that as a controller as well. And when you're setting up, say you're mapping different things to MIDI, you can either say, okay, map X and Y or Z, or you can do gestures. So one of the gestures they show in the demo videos is to do that, to rotate the hand, and it can actually tell you've done that, and that can trigger something. So that's like an on-off type thing. In a couple of the IK Multimedia videos on YouTube that are showing this, they use that to change the bank or the sound you're controlling or something like that. And the other thing to note is you said, these things can cost hundreds of pounds. These iRings are very cheap. A box of these costs £20 to get these. The iRing FX controller app and the iRing Music Maker app are free. Though to use them, you have to have an IK Multimedia account and log into the account through the app. So you get quite a decent kind of set of control. It's perhaps a little jumpy, a bit laggy. And the other thing is, if you set up, say you're using Audio Bus and some other apps with there, you always have to have the iRing app as the main front app, which is kind of obvious, really, to get the iRings to work. The problem there is that means that you probably have to jump back and forward between apps quite a lot. So if you're used to that through your normal iPad workflow, then there shouldn't be any problem. Sam, did you have a question? I don't know.
So were you able to get this controlling software on your computer through MIDI?
I didn't try this myself, but it is possible because it sends MIDI and then you can set up the wireless MIDI connection to your DAW. So in fact, I think that's probably the most useful potential use for this system. Because in a way it's nice because it kind of separates, you don't have to touch anything really, you can just leave it set up there on the side, and then when you want to use it you can just put on the rings and go and it should broadcast over to the DAW.
And is that just I just want to clarify that, and that's just MIDI data that it's just MIDI it's sending across, so you could, it's not hard tied into any DAW or any environment. You could just have the iRing host app on the kind of iPad or whatever, transmitting the control data to any other system that you have set up to receive the MIDI data, and then it could just work with it as it wanted to.
That's right. It's inside the app as it stands. So when you get the free app, what you get as part of that package is the ability to set up MIDI commands to transmit either within the iPad or iPhone or outside via wireless MIDI to whatever will pick it up. You also get one effect. So if I tap that there, yes. So you get a filter effect, like a low-pass filter, which is an audio effect, and you can get a set of, well, there's probably a good 20 other effects there, or maybe 16 other effects there, but you have to pay for those. So you tap on them, and then you can in-app purchase those. So things like a delay, a phaser, reverb, that kind of thing.
So you could use it as part of a modular setup. If you had lots of little synths or something connected together, you could have the audio going in, controlling the effects with the iRing, and then audio out into the chain. Is that what you mean by an audio effect?
The audio effects in the iRing FX controller app, you have to route the out. Say you route the output of your Chord gadget into the iRing FX controller app, and the effect is applied there, and then you bus it out to somewhere else.
Okay, so you'll need audio bus.
Yes, you do need audio bus. The other thing is that there's an iRing SDK, and I went online to find out more about it, and I was like, what is it for? What is an SDK for? And I could basically infer that it's for audio app makers to put iRing compatibility directly in their apps.
Oh, so that you'd be able to control an app without having to swap apps, like you were saying, to get the camera input.
Yeah, but that requires that third-party app maker to build it into their app. So, and I couldn't find a page that explicitly said that's what it's for, but that's the only conclusion I can come to.
That's quite an interesting contribution they're perhaps making, isn't it? Because so many of these systems have always been hobbled in a way by the kind of primitive lack of convention regarding the thing they're following. It's always been like it follows your hand or your finger, and that just in reality ends up just being a blob, and then it tries to track your blob around. But here, by saying here are two designed objects, and obviously with the three dots in the shape in the kind of prescribed shapes, it's easy to there's a background that you can perceive the dots on, and as a consequence it's fairly easy to track them if the lighting's at the right sort of level.
Yep.
And consequently, now that those things exist, it's really easy to say, and you can do all these things. You can, here's the gestures, here's the perceivable gestures you can see, here's the resolution of the interface that's available for the SDK. And now if you want to, you could offer anybody using your app, if they have iRings, they could just go, they could press a button, and now it turns on it turns on the camera, and suddenly you can start to use that interface in that sort of way.
Yeah. So as a kind of idea, it's really nice. Now, I had some problems with this, and I'll preface this with the fact that I'm not an iPad musician. I'm not someone who makes music on an iPad. I've got some apps there, but I make music on my computer. So a lot of the hoops you have to go through to get the system working in the first place, and then to get it to kind of interconnect with other apps is fussy, shall we say. Not very easy to implement, and the instructions that you get, I have to say, were kind of woeful. I mean, you get a nice little paper instruction manual. No, that's just a little brochure for other IK Multimedia stuff. But yeah, I mean, it basically shows you stuff like this. Like, this is how it kind of works, but it doesn't specifically tell you how to get it working.
Can you just show? Am I right in thinking that was a picture of how to wave your hands in front of an iPad?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
And then
I just wanted to make sure I hadn't missed any subtlety of that picture. That was all.
This is X is left and right, and Y is up and down. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of useless in its way. I went online to try and find more information. You have to log in to get the manual, and even the manual doesn't, like, I was trying to discover my way to it working, which is a very important part of iOS stuff. Usually you should be able to just pick it up by using the app. I couldn't get it to work at all before I logged in, and then I couldn't get it to work until I'd set the appropriate audio bus input and output, and then it was starting to play ball. So one thing to note is you have to, as far as I could ascertain, you have to buy audio bus to get this to work. I don't know if I couldn't get it to work through inter-app audio. I don't know how much other stuff uses that. And then to kind of use it as part of a system within the iPad, you also need to have other iPad apps that will work with audio bus and inter-app MIDI on the device. So £20 is fine, but expect that if you don't have these other things, you're going to have to buy them. And audio bus isn't expensive, but if you want to play with, it makes sense to have it working with Gadget or Loopy or whatever app. So you have to factor the price of those things in.
And So I'm saying you said that you had a kind of particular way of working, which is interesting. For me, this product strikes me as being most interesting as a way of having the control interface, being able to have the visual things, the non-physical interface in terms of touching sort of stuff. Is that a concern as well? I'm saying would I need to install Audio Bus as well to be able to run it even in that context of just pushing MIDI data across, or would you not want
Uh,
to comment? I don't know, you can-
I couldn't quite figure that one out because I was running Audio Bus and then I was having trouble with the MIDI, but then that was because it just wasn't playing ball with the Sunriser synth. And then when I set it to work with the gadget, it did work. But that already had the audio set up. So you might, if you're just using it as a controller, you might not need the Audio Bus. But it's still um, it's still a bit of you have to labor to get it kind of set up properly. And then in the end, I suppose its overall usefulness will be down to if that method of working appeals to you. So if you're one who'd be like, actually, I could see using this system as a really interesting way of transcending physical controls or touching the screen, then £20 is not a big outlay for that. But if you've got a pretty defined way of working, the novelty factor, it doesn't instantly hit you because it doesn't work straight away. You have to set it up a bit, and then it's whether whether you'd actually have this thing next to you and you'd actually use it, or whether it would just kind of sit there and you'd end up never using it. So from my perspective as a music maker, I probably wouldn't find this very useful, but I don't want to put people off because it does work and it does provide what I'd say is probably quite a unique way of interacting with whatever you want to connect it to. So yeah, I suppose that's
and I
a
guess
pretty good way to summarize it.
yeah, and in an iOS environment, there aren't as many obvious choices in terms of extension interfaces available and things like that. So it makes it good.
Well, I wonder if any other apps. I mean, I would assume that IK Multimedia music making apps will have the SDK integrated and you'd just be able to use these straight away.
Yeah.
I don't know what the uptake is because it's not quite the same as Audio Bus, which is, that's an SDK effectively, but it's so useful that you'd be crazy not to put it into your Pro Audio app. This is a bit more niche, and there'll be some people who'll be like, okay, let's put that in. If it's worth it, if it's easy to do. There are no instructions on, no publicly available instructions on the SDK on how you use it, how it implements. So you have to go through a bit of pain. I think if IK Multimedia opened that side of it up a bit, made it a bit more approachable, people would be more interested in putting it in their app. But I don't know.
Cool.
So I suppose that's kind of it. I mean, us three, this probably isn't our cup of tea in the end. We probably wouldn't use it so much.
Yeah, it sounds like it would be a great addition to someone who's already working with the iPad inter-app audio controlling stuff. It's a great way of adding to that setup. Whereas if you wanted to get into that, this isn't the place to start.
Yeah, and also if you're a Max MSP type person or need an interface, a thing to turn something into MIDI, something where you wave your hand over the screen into MIDI, pump it into Max or into Super Collider or into something really flexible like that, again, this is a pretty cheap way to do that.
I was thinking that for somebody you may be working on maybe an iPhone or an iPad mini or something, a device of that sort, then this is probably a really great option, because the more obvious choice is something like a 25 key keyboard or something, like a MIDI keyboard or something like that, isn't it? But then it's like I have my device, which is this sort of size, and I have my controller, which is huge, this massive box, and that's really not, that defies the point. What's the point in having the small device if you're going to have the huge controller? So it struck me that this is
One test I did do with the MIDI on this was generating note data, and the problem with it is that unless you set up a very complex X, Y, and gesture scheme, just moving your hand across the screen just plays notes in a scale. So you can't really you don't make music like that. You don't do it in scales. You make melodies. So I think it's probably the note side of things. You wouldn't use these at all because it's not very good at that. It's more useful for continuous controllers, that kind of thing. Setting up a modulation wheel or pitch bend or any of your CC numbers that you need, because then you get continuous control like that, and then you can do on and offs by doing this or by doing a punch. A punch is one of the gestures that you can set up in there as well.
Because it strikes me as being ideal for any sort of effects kind of gesture that you wanted to play into kind of control data that already existed, or as transformations that you wanted to do. If you wanted to fade something in, you wanted to fade something out, you wanted a filter sweep, or perhaps you wanted to do the filter sweep and then fade it out. Those kind of multiple gestures at once. It strikes me that this is the kind of interface that really leads itself to that sort of use in a way that requires programmatic work beforehand, but once you've done it, it's like, now I have this gesture ready to go that I can use in performance as I want to.
And there are presets in there, so you can set up your you can set up the different shapes to do different things, and you can switch between the presets to say, okay, this time I want X to change MIDI controller 42 or something like that. So
Adam, can you share those presets? So if someone were to set up a complicated configuration of these controllers, could that preset be shared between users?
That's a very good question. I can't see a way of doing it on here, but I don't think they're too. You could probably take a picture of a screenshot and just implement that. But
well, maybe that's something that they should add. I think that because it can take time to program all that kind of stuff in, especially to get subtle but intricate variations. That's not a lot of people just want to use that, whereas
as the app has to be logged in for you to use it, it's obvious that you could. The presets could just be synchronized with your IK Multimedia account, and then when they're up there, then you could share them that way. Being able to share within the app would be good, but I suppose, how would you do it? I suppose you could do it by email or something like that. That would be a good way for someone to develop the presets and then be able to get them to other places and save them and archive them as well, which is, a significant thing.
That's very true.
But yeah, I suppose that's kind of it, really. I'd say it's fairly niche, but it could be super useful to people playing in that niche. I couldn't recommend it to any person who uses music technology, but it's so cheap that you could just say, £20, yeah, let's give it a try, let's see what it can do.
I think a great review, Adam. I think that gave us a really solid insight into how the product was, and I think that's been really useful. I think perhaps we talked about it a little bit before the show, but I think perhaps as a group, and we all suffer slightly from this kind of jaded feel towards these technologies, which was we all had a play with the kind of pre-alpha prototypes that didn't work a decade ago. Yeah. And at that point, you could see enough to kind of have a feel for what you could do. I'm thinking here of systems that used ultrasonics, or some were camera-based, a lot were kind of pressure-based or radio receiver-based, these kind of technologies. And they always worked badly enough that you could kind of get a feel for what could be possible, but they never worked well enough that you would ever dare do it in a high-risk environment. So yeah, it was... And I think perhaps the issue that I'm feeling here, and I think maybe what you're getting, is that the subtlety of how to use these technologies is yet to be established, because perhaps this is the first tranche of the actual it works and it's affordable.
I would
for
say,
that you could now start to pound on it with some really great innovative ideas. And I suspect that this actually, while I agree right now with your perception, it's a niche product. I suspect that if you have a play with this, if you go and have a play with these, I suspect a large number of people will play with them and find that they think they're great. Actually,
well, yeah, I would say that it's true. I think because we come from a fairly experimental music tech background, we've gone through that phase of being like, oh wow, you can actually use your physical movements to control stuff. So that's not surprising or amazing to us, but it could be amazing to someone who hadn't really thought of it. I think what the iRings do is they take a step towards, because those technologies were always hard to set up, and you really had to know what you were doing. These iRings take a step towards it being more approachable and user friendly, but they're not there yet. I think IK Multimedia need to develop the approachability of these things to work better with the iOS way of thinking. Make it less, you have to log in less, or you can just have an app that you start up with that allows you to do something straight away, and you don't have to have your audio bus connection set up or set up a MIDI connection with your computer, because those are advanced things which people will use them for. But if you want to just get people interested straight away, really simple novelty app that is a bit more interesting than the Music Maker app, which I kind of didn't talk about, but it wasn't particularly, I didn't really find it very engaging as a first experience.
cool.
Otherwise, they've done a great job to kind of go there.
And so, Sam, do you have any final thoughts, or has your satisfaction been met?
I'm satisfied. My final thought is on the synthesizing some of the things that have been said, that perhaps the lack of detailed software setup instructions is because this is going to be a transforming environment. The hardware side of it is created and established, whereas how to get it working is going to change as iOS develops and as AudioBus develops and as apps do or do not adopt it. So I think a bit of leeway towards them on that. There's not much they could have printed. They've printed a million of these things, and if they'd have put software instructions, they'd be out of date in months.
A good web page, or a good way to find the web page, because to be honest, I only figured out the AudioBus stuff by watching a video that they made on YouTube, which is a good video to watch. It's how to integrate iRing FX, the app, with Gadget and Loopy HD via AudioBus. But I would have no idea that you'd need to set it up that way in order for it to work. So just like a landing page you can go to that's like, okay, online, these are some instructions to get you going. We can change them as the platform develops. You just have to put like one link in there,
Yeah.
and then you're fine. That was the main problem I had, is I got frustrated by not being able to figure it out myself.
Cool.
Thank you very much, Adam.
No problem.
And thank you very much to IK Multimedia for sending us a set of iRings to have a play with. That sounds like it's nice to hear that Adam got frustrated. That's pleasing to me.
Did we ever find out if do they want them back, or can we use them as part of an audio podcast prize or something? I don't know.
I don't know either. We should establish that, actually. We will find out.
So possibly some new audio podcast sections to be made at some point in the future. We could link it with the quiz, maybe. Oh. Let's get on to the news, guys.
Let's get on to the news. Okay, so first up in the news this week is Native Instruments have 50% off sale on most, if not all, of their products. Lots of products, upgrades and cross grades are all available at 50% off until the end of June.
Awesome.
Yep, that is correct. You can follow our show notes at theaudiopodcast.co.uk/show/119, and there's a little tip. You might want to check out the website between shows, because there's a lot of special offers and promotions running right now. And if a promotion doesn't get announced until after we've recorded the show, and it won't be still current when we record the show, it will never be mentioned in the show. So,
But it may be on the notes, yep.
but it will
Um,
be on the notes. So there was a Cycling 74 and an Ableton Live promotion running for over the weekend, which you may not have known anything about. We won't say anything about it, so as not to disappoint anybody anymore. But it's worth just keeping a little eye on it, just to just find these things.
Facebook might be a good way of doing that. Most of the show notes get mirrored onto the Facebook page, the audio podcast. News item number 2 is Steinberg.
Just before
Go
you
on.
go there, I've been looking down here, and it's especially important. This is a good one if you're wanting to like upgrade to like Complete 9 Ultimate or some of the big bundles that cost a lot of money, because you'll get a big discount on some of these, I think.
Okay, yep.
Cool. Steinberg have announced version 8.5 of Wavelab.
Very good. That's Windows and Mac these days, isn't it?
Indeed so. Cool features. You can do real-time comparisons of different codexes, and if you want to, you can export to multiple file formats at once.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Now we can move on to some really core audio podcast terrain, which is headphones, but not Beats headphones. This time we've got some AKGs to talk about, which is good because I like AKG headphones.
Me too. These are very brightly coloured headphones. That seems to be what they're going on here as much as anything. And they fold up nicely, which is a nice kind of portability thing. It's the Y series is what we're talking about.
They are designed to inspire music lovers, provides listeners with an escape to channel their innovation.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if AKG's normal blurb writer was on holiday that day, and they just had to have, like, the guy who makes the tea write the blurb for that one. But you got to say, these look good. They come in 3 different models. You've got Y50s, Y45s, and Y40s. If you go to the link in the notes, you'll see the Y40s. And they all are slightly different spec. I mean, let's have a look. We've got, I guess they're all kind of closed ear cup types.
I couldn't tell the difference between. I couldn't find anywhere a clear statement what the difference between a Y40 and a Y50 was. But the Y45 is a Bluetooth one with 8 hours of battery life, and I thought something that was really cool, a NFC to actually do the connection as well. So near field to actually do the link up between the two products. I thought that was pretty cool.
I don't think iOS does NFC, does it? But Android does it.
Android does, yeah.
Does it? I think maybe the Y40s are just smaller ear cups, smaller earpieces, slightly different color design. The band is colored rather than the ear cup being colored. If you go to the link in the notes, you see the difference in designs. And they start at £70 and go up to £110 depending on which model you want. Those are coming soon. Do we have an idea of what date they might be out, Scott?
It's June this year, so
oh, it's so close.
Should be now-ish, really.
Fantastic.
And I think it was like it was last week that I got the email on this. Headphones have become a bit of an audio podcast kind of obsession recently, which is kind of fun. And the much rumored audio podcast headphone special will obviously arrive at some point in the distant future. But,
the Vaporware audio podcast.
The Vaporware audio podcast headphone special. But I do feel that I do think that when we come to the end of this season, which I guess will be at some point in the future. And we have our summer break. I suspect we may, when we return back from the summer holiday, have to admit that we can no longer just do random consumer electronic headphones, because it's just getting a bit silly, really, isn't it? Because
I think
these ones are bright colors as well. I guess that seems.
Well, this is clearly like the whole Beats thing must have had an impact on this, because AKG have been making great headphones for a long time. But it's no longer good enough just to make great headphones. You have to kind of appeal to the fact that these are kind of fashion. These are things that you wear. Therefore, they're kind of cool in some way or something.
I think it's even worse than that, Sam. I think making great headphones is a complete waste of your time. It's they don't need to sound good. It's entirely looks orientated right now. If you're wanting to sell 1 million of them, it's all about looks.
Guys, I've got it. Okay, headphones with little wings that stick out, and what they actually do is when you walk along, they kind of raise you up they're like little aerodynamic devices that take weight off your feet so that you're not as uncomfortable when you're walking around. Yeah, audio
Yeah.
podcast innovation.
Woohoo! There we go. Let's move on. There we
And we're
go.
back to IK Multimedia. IK Multimedia have announced or released the iRig BlueBoard. So this is a stump box board for controlling your iRig setup.
Keep
Is
reading,
that-
Sam. Keep reading on. Keep reading.
That was all off the top of my head. I'm now looking and saying, what actually is it? That's my guess
Is
of
it
what it is.
hardware?
It's
No.
Bluetooth
Keep
control.
reading the notes. Read the notes.
On the webpage. Go on,
Yeah.
fill me in. Go on, I'm not going to get there now.
Oh, okay. The developer's manual and license agreement is free to get. No, that's not significant.
So IK Multimedia released the iRig BlueBoard a while ago, which is a board which has buttons that you can press. Which
okay,
is what
so
it
that's
is. But
hardware.
that's hardware, yes. But the latest announcement is the fact that there is a developer's manual available now to aid developers integrating the iRig BlueBoard with iOS, which I suspect was the product that Adam had was making mention of the lack of existence of for the iRings.
Okay.
There.
Yeah. Brilliant.
I thought the BlueBoard's pretty cool though. I'm saying it's a Bluetooth. It's like a box with buttons that connects via Bluetooth. Like that's.
This is
No,
the
it's-
one thing during my iRing, playing with iRing, and I was typing in iRing into Google and stuff, and iRig came up a lot, and I was like, or Google autocomplete, and so I had to always go in and add the N, because these two products are different, but their names are almost the same.
Anyway, that wasn't to say that wasn't useful, Adam. I'm sorry. But the iRig BlueBoard Developers Manual is available free of charge, but you do have to contact IK Multimedia by email. The email's in the show notes, because there is a license agreement that you have to agree to as well to receive the manual. But there you go.
We must have not noticed this when it was new, because this is the first time we've talked about it, and it's quite a good. Now I'm reading about it. It's a great product actually, because it's not just an iOS controller. It's using Bluetooth, and it can control to a Mac as well, not Windows unfortunately. And it's extendable. You can plug foot controllers into it. Just your standard expression controller appears to jack in. So I think this is a great little thing.
It's a kind of very specific MIDI interface almost.
Yeah.
It's a foot controller. But yeah.
Okay, so that's the end of the news, guys.
We've made it to the end of the news, which means that it's time for the other section, and for a remarkable event in the annuals of the audio podcasts. Something we said we would do this week, last week, is actually going to happen.
Yes.
Hey.
Okay. Well, this is continuing the mini-series of audio podcast setups and how we podcast. So for this, I'm going to switch cameras, this little handheld USB diddly, so I can show you what is going on. So I'll just switch
Whoa, we're
controls.
going into an all-new place in the audio podcast.
Okay. Well, I mean, we can talk about the room I'm in, which is a windowless cupboard, which measures 80 centimeters by 120 centimeters. So nice, cozy, and is acoustically treated with thick blankets on the wall, which is a very cheap but actually effective way of sorting things out. Okay, let's stop making people sick on the video camera and show my audio interface. Or perhaps we should start with the microphone. Let's start with the microphone. This is a condenser microphone, pencil type, cardioid pickup. I have no idea who it's made for. It's got absolutely no markings to suggest the manufacturer at all. A friend once suggested that maybe whoever made this was actually ripping off someone's design and didn't want to get in trouble with that. I don't know, but it's a very versatile microphone, which I currently have connected into. Let the camera steady. This Behringer Xenix Q502 USB interface. I got this quite recently actually. I wanted something that would work standalone without the USB. So if you unplug the USB, it still works as an analog mixer, but it has 2 in, 2 out through the USB. So that's going through there. So that gives phantom power for the microphone, and it's also got a kind of single knob compressor thing, a bit much like the small Yamaha desks do. But yep, so I'm running that through there, a little bit of compression. And if I did want to put other audio in, I could through here. But for the output, I am using just the laptop's built-in headphone output. So if there was to be a problem with the USB audio, I could switch to, I wouldn't lose monitoring in the ears. That's pretty much it for the audio podcast setup currently. I mean, I've had lots of different setups in the past, using different audio interfaces, different preamps, different microphones, but this is my portable, pretty much, setup that I could set up anywhere, as long as there's a microphone stand wherever I go. So yeah.
Easy.
Cool.
Tight. Simpler than Scott's setup.
All
Scott's
right.
is like the no, Scott, yours is like the ultimate redundant podcast setup where, you know, if the only thing that would stop you podcasting was a plane crashing into your house or something like that.
Or hitting the BT cable that connects my house to the internet.
Yes. But even then, I'm sure you'd have like, oh, I've got like 20 gigabytes of mobile data, so I'll just connect it by my phone or something.
That's very good.
Okay. So next week I'll cover my setup next week, and we'll complete the series.
Ooh. How about that? Another audio podcast promise. Will it come true? Find out next week.
But before next week's continuation and completion of the audio podcast tech mini series, we've got the plunder.
Arg.
The first of which is a report from The Verge on a Kickstarter campaign that has allowed Richard D. James's '94 album, which actually I don't know the name of, to be released and is now available for free listening on YouTube. Richard D. James, of course, being another name for Aphex Twin. But this album was actually made under a different name. It was made under the name Caustic Window.
Cool.
Cool. 94 was a good year for albums, so I have high hopes for this. I might have a listen. I think there was a lot of good music released in 1994. It's just such as I don't want to let I'm gonna hold back on that. Actually.
No, this is a great question. I'm curious now. What was released in '94?
Well, this kind of shows like the dark side of my 90s pop love that I grew up with.
That's okay.
But we've got things like, I think TerraVision's How to Make Friends and Influence People is a great album. Blur's Park Life.
Also, yeah, of course, yes, also great.
It's been so long. An Oasis album.
Yes,
was it great? Who knows?
I don't. It's been so long since I used to have a playlist in Spotify of 90s albums. Whenever I was browsing, I'd put any album into this enormous playlist that I'd hit shuffle on. But I noticed that a lot of the good ones came up as 94, which is how, yeah.
And also, interestingly, linked to Aphex Twin, of course, the style of Aphex Twin, Otecker released Amber in '94, November '94, and that's one of my favourites of Oteckers actually, because it's before they went all crazy and mad and did all this crazy Mac stuff, which is a certain, I'm not saying it's bad, it's just a different type of thing. Amber's a bit more straight up, intelligent techno type stuff, and it's actually quite minimalist as well. I recommend if you haven't heard Amber by Otecker, that was released in the same year. Go for it.
There's loads of stuff, and anything by Culture Beat, All for Love by Bryan Adams, Rod Stewart, and Sting. I'm reading the singles chart now from '94 here.
Oh yeah,
this is fantastic. Ace of Base.
Oh, I had to check. There was one I was double checking, but it was 95, so it don't matter.
Is that 95? Wait, I got a great question for you here. I'm just finding the answer for myself. Oh, that's not very. Cotton Eye Joe by Rednecks. How about that? We didn't pick that out for that week, could you?
We've never mentioned that on the audio podcast before.
Power Rangers, the official single. Oh. This is because this is pre See, there's a group of people who say that the Christmas #1 was destroyed by Simon Cowell and, kind of those programs like whatever they're called. But a lot of people forget that long before Simon Cowell destroyed the Christmas #1, celebrities and inflatable characters had done it long beforehand. That's fantastic stuff. Anyway, there we go. I thought that's cool. This should be a new game. What year were these songs in the top 10? This could be a great game. That's as nice easy list. Anyway, I'm sorry. When we talk about things that you could listen to, my item of plunder here was I came across this a while ago, and it's kind of interesting. So it might be of interest to people as well. But the American Library of Congress maintains a national jukebox, which is a collection of historical recordings that they keep a record of. So this is stuff that dates back to records and before, and can be it's stuff that dates back to records and before, records and befores, and radio kind of broadcasts and things like this. And there's lots of news and sports in there, but also kind of musical performances as well. So it's quite a.
Does it have play a random thing or select a random? That would be really good.
No, it just has it just gives you a list of all of the things it has, and you can just go and have a look through them, have a listen through them. So.
Yep. They have more than 10,078 on their thing. That were
and are these now out of copyright, so they're public domain?
You're certainly allowed to. You can certainly listen to them. I'm not sure what the licensing in terms of reuse is or isn't, and I suspect that the vagrancies of international and national law will probably start to complicate that factor as well. Because
yes, I mean that's a phrase that has been uttered many times in many different situations regarding law.
Yes.
Basically, law complicates everything.
Well. The point I'm trying to put across is that even if the Americans believe that you could sample this material and use it in your own works, there's a good chance that it might not be the case.
Or they might just have the license to put them up for listening rather than reuse.
From what I've just been able to get in the past few seconds, there's no one licensing for the whole collection. Individual items have as much information as possible about what their copyright status is.
I thought this was cool. I thought this was a really, really great, a really great idea. It was, we've obviously made it to the end of the plunder, so I don't mind just labouring a point that is only slightly related to the audio podcast, as our non-hardcore listeners will have given up a long time before this. But and if you're still listening, you're in the hardcore, but you knew you were there anyway. But this is all part of that grand futurist promise of the kind of 50s and the 60s, where every book in the world was you would be able to go and search for any book in the world and read any book in the world, and the free flow of knowledge would be really really free and exciting. And people like Microsoft have tried this and given up, and Google have been in court and won a case last week that's a
kind of important case, but that's a very specific thing though, isn't it?
But that allows them to continue digitizing books. And when I see projects like this, I just think it's really, this is really great, isn't it? The idea that you could go back and listen to these key events and non-key events, and just illustrative examples of thoughts and ideas and opinions and things like this are going to be available in a way that you can access them and find them and use them. I think that's a really great idea. And I was really encouraged when I found this a while ago, and I thought it was really great. And it only dawned on me today to plunder it. But I think it's a great thing, and
it is. Continue. I've mentioned. I think it was in relation to the quiz. An answer was Alan Blumlein, and linked through that to the British Library's audio collections, which have a lot of the original Blumlein experiments with stereo audio, and these collections, in terms of national collections, are on both sides of the Atlantic. I wonder where else has them.
That's cool. There we go. I think we should call it. We should bring ourselves to the conclusion of this show. So there you go. This has been the audio podcast show 119. How about that? Ongoing summer beats. Apparently was the title selected for this one here. Don't forget, if you have any complaints, feel free to email them to us. If you have nice things to say, feel free to email them as well. Facebook, G+, Twitter, all those things are great.
The
If you enjoy the
email
show,
for
feel free to
complaints.
subscribe. We do our best to record the show on a Tuesday, but we don't always achieve it. And even when we do achieve it on a Tuesday, our time is quite kind of wobbles a lot. So the easiest way to definitely get the show is just to hit subscribe on whatever your preferred method is, and it will automatically arrive to you when it's done. So you don't have to worry about ever missing an episode, which I know is a grave concern of Adam's.
Well, yes, and if you ever the email for complaints to the show is we are not going to read any of these emails at theaudiopodcast.co.uk.
Excellent stuff. Excellent stuff. There we go. I've been Scott Hewitt. I've had a great show. Thank you very much.
I've been Samuel Freeman. I'll be back next week.
And I'll be Adam Yanch, and and I am Adam Yanch, and I will be back next week. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Bye.